Why didn't that affidavit make worldwide news? His bogus charges made worldwide news. So why shouldn't someone who was at the trial all 5 months except for 3 days and the verdict day, why shouldn't that be picked up by Reuters and AP Wire Service? Only appeared in the Santa Barbara News Press, largest newspaper in Santa Barbara. But most of us don't read the Santa Barbara News Press. We gave up on finding real news in the Santa Maria Times or the Santa Barbara News Press. We gave up on it decades ago because we could see what was happening. Why isn't the chief of police of Santa Barbara under indictment? Why isn't Sneddon, Ron Zonen, Gordon Auchincloss, and Meg Nicola from the Santa Barbara District Attorney's Office, why aren't they being indicted by a special prosecutor when I put an affidavit before them back in August 14th of 2012? Why hasn't our gutless 5 county supervisors stood up and said, we will appoint a special prosecutor and he will look into it? And then they can wash their hands. No, they wash their hands first and just let's ignore this. This is incredible that someone like myself, who's done a television show for more than 10 years, who does his own research, does his own interviews, presents them an affidavit saying, look, I'm the one guy who was there the most in the media pool. And I'm telling you, the whole trial of Michael Jackson was bogus. And they brought in 3 of the boys from the 92 alleged period, and Jordy Chandler was forced by his father, who later committed suicide after Michael died in 2009. Jordy Chandler didn't want to say the things his father put him in a dentist chair, gave him a sleeping sedative, and planted false evidence in his head. No wonder he committed suicide. His son Jordy must have said something like, damn you, Father. Michael was my best friend, and you killed him. And his father, that was the end of him. Or maybe somebody who put Dr. Chandler up to doing this, maybe that person helped Dr. Chandler commit suicide. I find it amazing that when Jim Thomas, our retired sheriff, could leak all this misinformation to the corporate media in 2005, I find it amazing that his wife is divorcing him, is likely to gain the marital residence and half his pension, and she decides to commit suicide. Really? And then they let the coroner's department from Santa Barbara investigate that suicide. Now, wait a minute. The sheriff is also sheriff/coroner. So all these guys in the coroner's office, they all know the sheriff. They don't know his wife so well. This was highly inappropriate. As I said back then, and most of you are probably, what, the sheriff's wife committed suicide? I never heard of that. No, you weren't supposed to hear about it. But I spoke about it on this show way back then. And I remember talking to Sheriff Public Relations Officer Sergeant Rainey and saying, Sergeant Rainey, I'd like to have the autopsy report. I'd like to have the chem test report. And I'd like the crime scene photos where they say, because we've seen no proof, and the sheriff won't give us those photographs. And he says, Mr. Wagener, you'll have to go to court to get those, which I reminded Sheriff Sergeant Rainey, that's public information. Coroner's reports have always been public information. And Sergeant Rainey said words to the effect, well, Mr. Wagener, most of the media is going along with us to keep this low profile. Really? Well, I didn't agree. So they retaliate. And they say, well, Mr. Wagener, we're not going to give you a sheriff's media credential. Really? How corrupt does it have to get before you start throwing everybody out of office every election? But it didn't happen, did it? Maybe it's because the elections were rigged. So even if you did vote them out of office, the rigged vote scanning machines, which were proven in a documentary done by a wonderful woman named Harris, Bev Harris, who has now been silenced. She did a wonderful called Hacking Democracy and proved the elections offices in many counties all over the country were violating their own election laws. And we've got this John Branca and this Attorney McCain representing the estate of Michael Jackson. An estate probably worth, over 10 years, at least $1 billion. And he's paying off Michael's debts. You know what? I sat through that trial in 2005. They spent 3 days on Michael's financial woes. And I kept thinking, what has this got to do with molestation? What has his finances got? Well, what it had to do is to gut him open to the financial sharks and say, look how vulnerable Michael Jackson is. I look back and I read that contract for $200 million loan from Bank of America to Michael Jackson in August of 2003, and it doesn't require monthly payments in cash, it requires quarterly repayments every 3 months. August, September, October. Come November, his first payment's due on a $200 million loan, and it must be paid in cash. Whereas Michael, he's lining up contracts. He's doing something for a soda pop company in Las Vegas, Nevada. 3 months, just when that first payment's coming up, all of a sudden, Thomas Nedden jumps up and says, oh, I'm indicting him. All those contracts to make money for Michael evaporated. Nobody wants someone who's being indicted for child molesting to push their product. Isn't that just a strange coincidence? Wait a minute. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt told me, through words, he was long dead when I started thinking about it, but he said in his memoirs and written records, FDR said, in politics, nothing is a coincidence. Everything is planned. If it happened, it was planned to happen. And that's from a Democratic president I didn't even like, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who died in bed with his mistress, not his wife. But that's all covered up, and nobody talks about that. And of course, Dwight D. Eisenhower, the Republican president, almost ran as a Democrat. He also was banging his Jeep driver, a very beautiful, pretty woman during World War II. Probably keeping him smiling and happy every night, because Mamie Eisenhower was far away in the United States, and this gal was driving his Jeep and helping him sleep well every night. But Republicans didn't find that out till decades later, long after Eisenhower was dead. We didn't find out that LBJ, President Lyndon Baines Johnson, during the Six-Day War between Egypt, Syria, and Israel, the nation secular state, in June of 1967, Lyndon Baines Johnson was heard by admirals and people in the Navy saying, I want that goddamn ship at the bottom of the ocean. We're not going to embarrass our ally Israel. What goddamn ship was he talking about? Well, he was talking about the USS Liberty, an American spy ship, one of ours, one of the red, white, and blue American spy ships. And it was put 10 miles off the coast of Egypt. Then it was strafed by jets with Israeli markings. Then it was hit by a torpedo boat that was clearly marked Israel torpedo boat. Egypt didn't even have a torpedo boat. And Egypt and Syria's planes had been banged and shot up the first day of the Six-Day War. They didn't have any jets to fly over and attack the USS Liberty. It was supposed to sink, and we were supposed to blame Egypt and Syria, and then the United States was supposed to come in with nukes and nuke Cairo, nuke Syria, for the benefit of Israel, who at the time didn't have nukes. Well, wait a minute. You say you never heard this. Well, you weren't supposed to know this. The surviving sailors, and there were over 130 that died, plus, many wounded. But that commander of the USS Liberty managed, with that ship listing and almost sinking, get it back to port after being torpedoed, strafed, hit with chemical bombs on the deck, 130 plus killed and wounded by our ally, Israel. And now we're building bases up all around in what I call subject Arab states, Bahrain, Abu Dhabi, the Emirates, Saudi Arabia, all around Iran. And we're making war sounds, cling, cling, we must attack Iran. Why? Because he might get a nuclear weapon? This is insanity. Egypt and Pakistan have been at each other's throats for years, and we gave them both what they needed to have nuclear weapons. They're both armed with nuclear weapons, and they've been banging it out in the Kashmir Pass for years. But we're going to get all upset because Iran might get a nuclear weapon? These people are very much like Americans in everything except their religion. And they tolerate Christians, even tolerate Jews. Maybe not very well, but they tolerate them. There's no need for World War III. But with lunatics like John McCain and Romney being handed the Republican nomination, and the only alternative is a liar like Barack Obama, whose real name was probably Barry Soetoro when he was going to school in Indonesia, and he was born in Kenya, which at the time was a British colony known as Zanzibar. But all that's irrelevant. You can say, oh no, he was born in Hawaii, and believe the lies if you want to. But it's been well documented, well proved that he wasn't born in Hawaii. Why can't we get this issue up there? Why won't Congress indict him, remove him, impeach him? Because most of Congress, with the exception of Ron Paul, who's now retiring, he's in his last few days of holding his congressional seat, and his son, Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky, except for these two and maybe 3 or 4 others, the whole Congress has been bought off. Remember Joe Lieberman from, what's that little state, Connecticut? He lost his Democratic primary, but he's Jewish. Can't have a Jewish guy lose his Democratic primary. Oh no, that looks bad. So the Jewish lobby came in, I'm not going to name the lobby, but they came in with millions of dollars and had him run as an independent, and boom, he beat the Democratic Party's hand-picked anti-war person. Why am I bothering you with all these details? Same reason I asked you this question. How many people in California, the 38 or 40 million, including the illegals, the 40 million people in California are of the Jewish faith? What? No? Not 1%? 3.3%, okay? How is it 100% of our U.S. senators, Boxer and Feinstein, are Jewish? How are the Jews so overrepresented in just that faction? 2 U.S. senators, both Jewish, that's 100%, and yet they represent only 3% Jewish wide in California. I'm not anti-Jewish. No one should be anti any religion. I just wonder, where is the representation? Are there no Baptists, no Catholics, no Methodists, no Protestants?